Welcome to another edition of the Fans Week podcast, also on medium waves 1575 kHz for the greater Milan area. From Paris, I'm Ami Carter-Wilson. Prime Minister Sebastian Le Cornu's grand strategy, coal, birth rates, and the 500-month chart that explains everything. By Ami Carter-Wilson, May 17, 2026. There is a single chart that explains almost everything about French political economy today. It does not appear on evening news broadcasts. It is just a dry line graph tracking the global price per metric ton of thermal coal from roughly January 1975 to present day. This is 500 months compressed into one curve that moves from near $40 per ton in the mid-1970s to around €130 today, with no sustained period below those levels since 2020. What most politicians would rather avoid staring at directly reveals the structural trap Prime Minister Sebastian Le Cornu is trying, and arguably failing or succeeding beyond recognition, to govern inside. Because beneath that curve, over roughly the same 500-month span, France's total fertility rate has fallen from about 2.7 children per woman in mid-1975 to approximately 1.64 today. This is a decline so tightly correlated against rising energy costs that it borders on structural causation rather than mere statistical coincidence. The chart and its story. The 50-month moving average, which is roughly a 4.5-year smoothing window that strips commodity seasonality and geopolitical spikes while preserving secular trends, was essentially flat through the 1970s. It climbed modestly in the 80s during European deindustrialization, as France shifted from domestic coal to imports from Australia and Colombia. It remained relatively stable until roughly 2016, when decarbonization mandates collided with geopolitical instability across Eastern Europe, and then it began its decisive upward trajectory. By late 2025, early 2026, the average sits near 110 to 130 euros per ton. This is well below the 2022 peak, but structurally above anything seen before 2020, and certainly impossible to revert under any conventional energy market mechanism available today. This is not merely an academic observation. France's birth rate decline tracks closely, with rising industrial production costs driven precisely by those moving average coal price increases. When manufacturing becomes more expensive over a 50-month horizon, factories relocate, blue-collar communities hollow out, and family planning decisions shift decisively toward deferral or reduction of children per household. The result is a working-age population growth rate that collapsed from approximately 1.3% annually in 2005 to roughly negative 0.4% by 2025. This makes the pay-as-you-go pension system and demographic-dependent public school funding mathematically unsustainable without either radical policy interventions, such as immigration reform at a significant scale, which is politically toxic given current parliamentary dynamics, or massive productivity gains through automation alone, like the artificial intelligence investments that are now central to government priorities. Le Cornu's playbook, the Hormuz pivot. Prime Minister Sebastian Le Cornu inherited an impossible matrix, and responds with something that looks like either bold pragmatism or electoral suicide, depending on who is asking. The latest proof of his governing philosophy emerged last week, when he explicitly advocated increasing coal usage across French power infrastructure, specifically as a cost-cutting response to Iran's escalating military tensions in the Strait of Hormuz. He argued that closure would theoretically send oil prices soaring even higher, while forcing France to rely more heavily upon domestic thermal power facilities that consume precisely the cheaper, though polluting, fuels. To environmental critics, whom the Prime Minister addressed directly before a parliamentary committee session on energy policy early this month, Le Cornu stated plainly, "That's a problem for our child and grandchild, not for us." This sentence does more political damage than many editorial condemnations combined. It reveals clearly what much of his broader economic strategy already suggests: an approach to governance defined by short-term competitiveness above all else, willing to accept long-term environmental consequences as someone else's future problem rather than current state responsibility. Key irony, and perhaps the insight, is that Le Cornu's position aligns structurally with what a 50-month moving average of coal prices would predict. Energy cost optimization decisions made inside electoral cycle horizons naturally favor cheap, abundant fossil fuels over sustainable investment pathways whose benefits span decades rather than parliaments. Why this chart defines his political survival. The chart is not merely analytical background. For Le Cornu's coalition, it reads almost like a strategic roadmap. If energy costs have shifted structurally upward and fertility has declined correspondingly across roughly the same period, then industrial competitiveness depends entirely upon either accepting permanent deindustrialization trajectories with resulting fiscal consequences from relocated firms, or pursuing aggressive reindustrialization backed by domestic energy cost arbitrage. This means increasing coal usage despite environmental reform commitments, particularly in present geopolitical circumstances including Hormuz vulnerability. The Prime Minister's government recently tabled an €8 billion industry du futur framework, combining significant tax credits for AI-driven automation adoption, plus strategic investments targeting zones franches, which are former industrial towns with the highest youth unemployment rates. Simultaneously, Le Cornu has proposed restructuring the transition énergétique away from purely eco-friendly investment rhetoric toward a national energy-independent framing. Nuclear provides baseload stability, renewables address peak demand, and domestic coal infrastructure serves as an insurance policy against shipping lane disruption, particularly during heightened Hormuz tensions, where Iranian naval capability escalations could theoretically restrict global oil trade routes within weeks. Whether this strategy survives into legislative mandate territory depends upon one variable alone. Can the French electorate accept a prime minister who frames energy policy explicitly around short-term economic competitiveness, cost-cutting through coal expansion as geopolitical crisis looms, and long-term environmental consequences for our child and grandchild, not for us, without treating that framing itself as electoral disqualification? The polling numbers suggest deep uncertainty heading toward the next legislative elections. Le Cornu himself has never directly answered whether he is campaigning on a restructured green transition platform or running an explicit fossil fuel expansion agenda, perhaps because neither characterization fully captures what his approach truly represents. Pragmatic economic optimization, above all ideological commitments. Amy Carter Wilson, economics columnist contributing to the Wall Street Journal from Milan. That's all from today. From Paris, I'm Amy Carter Wilson.